This time you know what? This time on Boneyard Revivals, it's our head-to-head clash of our small block Chevy cylinder heads. Compare the numbers, the facts, and we're going to pick a winner out of these three heads. And I guess let's get into the video. Roll it! So like I said before, we have our three cylinder heads here that we've been comparing in our past three videos. It's our 624, I say 426 before, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about. Our 624 head, our Vortec cylinder head, which is our 062 casting, and our Swirl Port head, which this one happens to be the 193 casting. So just as a review, we already did a video on all these where we compared these individually. This video is going to be an overview. I'm going to repeat all the facts I said for each individual one, and then we're going to compare them and just have a discussion on them. So starting all the way over here to our left with our 624 heads. These were in small block 350s from 1976 to 1978. They had a 194 intake valve and a 150 exhaust valve. These, for a chamber, had a 76cc combustion chamber. These had the traditional perimeter bolt covers pattern for your valve cover. These also had press-in studs. For the pros and cons of these heads, these had the very, very typical small block Chevy, obviously 194 intake and 150 exhaust valve. These were very prone to cracking. Very, very prone to cracking. And these honestly did not have a very good chamber size. So besides that, the only good thing I can say is that if you have a complete set that, run, at least you can put them on a engine, but besides that, I wouldn't say they're that good. Moving over here, we're going to go in chronological order. So these obviously were produced from 76 to 87. Let's move over here to our Swirl Port head. Like I said before, this is their 193 casting. These were produced from 1987 to 1995. There's two castings of the Swirl Ports, the 193s and the 191s. You can check that by pulling your valve cover off and looking for the casting number. The last three digits of the casting number is going to identify as what the head is. Like I said, these are 193s, therefore the last three digits in that casting number is going to be 193. The 193s had a 64cc chamber, 194 intake valve, and a 150 exhaust valve. The 191 casting had a 76cc chamber with the same size intake and exhaust valve, so the 194s and the 150s. So the differences between these and our 624s is that they changed to a center bolt valve cover style, where basically your valve cover adapt via the center of the head, not the perimeter of the head. Also, the four center bolts in the head that would be on your intake side actually changed angle. So for head, on one head it's only the two center bolts, but when you have two heads on the motor, it'd be your four center ones. They actually changed the angle of them so they didn't match the outer, so you'd need to get a special adapter manifold. So this is a Speedmaster dual plane high-rise intake, and what I'm talking about here is on the sides. If you look, do you see how those bolt holes are elongated on both sides? Basically they did that so they could fit the Swirl Port heads over here. Now, you can get away if you wanted to, if you had a stock intake or whatever, you can actually probably drill these out or, bore them out, make them a little bit bigger and make it fit. But that is one thing that you do definitely have to take notice if you want to try to use your traditional intake manifold within putting these in an application. Or just basically elongate the holes that are on a regular intake manifold like this one would take in order to fit a traditional intake manifold on them. Pros and cons about these heads. Pros are they're actually a pretty decent head when you really do the math on it. They did exactly what they were supposed to do from the factory. They produce low-end torque because of their Swirl Port design. Swirl Port design, basically, the air and fuel comes together into your intake port. When it goes down into your valve, it actually goes in and then swirls around the valve, hence the reason why we call these Swirl Port heads. So it was really good for fuel economy and low-end torque, but the cons about it is that these heads would not run past 4,500 RPM. They pretty much just fell flat on their face and nosedived. So good head, but also, you know, not good head. Of course, in the center here, we have our last head. This is going to be the Vortec cylinder head. As you guys know, I'm a big fan of these. We did a set of 906s. This happens to be an 062 casting head. These were put in 350s and 305s from 1996 to 2000. And the 906s and the 062s were exactly the same across the board. There were two different castings, but they're the same exact head. 194 intake valves and 150 exhaust valves. So all of these heads had the same exact valves. All of them. All of them. The Vortec head happened to have a 64cc chamber. Because of their intake port design, these flowed a lot, like well over 200 CFM, where both of these heads were lucky if they even flowed like 170 something, I think. It was not very impressive how much your 420 or the 624 and the Swirl Port heads actually flowed. So of course, now that we've kind of gone through all the facts of them all, let's go through the pros and cons, why I like one, why I don't like the other one. Starting with the 624s. I don't like the 624s as an overall head. I do like the old school perimeter bolt pattern for valve covers, because you can get a lot of perimeter aftermarket perimeter bolt styled valve covers. It's really hard to get center bolt ones. I've looked, and finding an equivalent to perimeter bolt style is like an extra $100-150. It's seriously, it's ridiculous. So that's one pro and one tick I'll give to the 624. Now the Swirl Port head, I like this head honestly because it's kind of an underdog head. Yeah, you can do a bunch of stuff to it and you're never going to actually produce what you want it to produce. But it's the type of head that when you have it, you know what you got. It's not it's not prone to cracking like the Vortec and the 624 heads are. It's just a really good overall usable head. And honestly, if you're building a motor that's going in a heavy duty truck and it's going to be a 350, I'd say potentially do them up. That with a good low-end torquey cam, you'd be pretty happy with the results that you'd get there. So that's why I don't want to knock them completely. My winner for out of between these three heads is going to be the Vortec heads, hands down. Look, I said it in the Vortec video that we talked about. Yes, they're prone to cracking. It's a real deal. I'm not going to deny that. But with the port design and the fact that you can put the bigger valves in them, which you can put bigger valves in all of these, but just the port design alone and the CFM that they can flow off the intake is hands down the best. I would argue that these are the best cast small block Chevy heads, period. Even better than the camel humps. My argument. Now, I'm not going to knock the camel hump heads, but I just think from a certain standpoint that the Vortec heads are arguably better. They just flowed super good. So my winner out of these three heads is going to be the Vortec heads. Now, of course, you can say, well, oh, you didn't have a set of camel hump heads to compare. Yes, all of these heads are small block Chevy 350 heads, and they were all out of trucks, which is kind of why I want to do this comparison, because it was a straight up side-by-side comparison. And obviously, all three of these heads are going to be heads that you're going to find relatively available in a junkyard. Tell me where you can find a set of camel hump heads that does not have a ridiculous price attached to it. I'll wait. If you set a casting from Summit, just stop watching this video. And I'm not trying to be mean, but what I'm saying is a cast set of heads that you can find in a junkyard or on Marketplace, something like that. These are what you're going to find almost on a daily basis, these three heads right here. So that's why I want to do this comparison for you and kind of give you just my rough ideas. One other thing about our Vortec head is that you had to get a Vortec specific intake manifold, which kind of sucks because basically they completely changed it from a 4-bolt design to a 6-bolt design in all the corners. So you completely had to get a different intake. You couldn't use the old style intake, which really did suck. And that's one thing I will say that I will knock the Vortec heads. If you decide to go with a Vortec head, you have to go Vortec specific. There is stuff that you can use to get around it. You can, if you wanted to, you could get a center bolt design adapter to design the center bolt to the outer bolt, to the old school perimeter bolt. I have a set of those on my square body right now, and I'm not very happy with them because they're leaking oil. So, no, it's just something that's a legitimate concern for me. You don't want to be messing with that kind of stuff and then have it go wrong. You just want to bolt it all together and have it work and not be struggling with stuff. But like I said, the best head out of all 3 of these sitting here is the Vortec head. But if you go with the Vortec head, you got to go Vortec specific. Where with the Swirl Port heads, you don't fully have to. You're going to need your center bolt valve covers, but center bolt valve covers, the stock ones anyways, are not hard to get. Obviously, you can use them on the Vortec heads too, so that kind of eliminates that whole problem. But when it actually comes to your intake manifold, you can get away with using a traditional intake manifold if you basically make the 4 center holes bigger and cut the angle on them a little bit so they adapt to that. As the Vortec heads, you can't. So it's one of those give and takes, and that's why where I feel like when you look at it on paper, a lot of guys are going to sit here and tell me that the camel hump heads are better. I see your point. There's a lot of struggles that you have with the Vortec heads with making them work in your application, but when it comes to actually bolting them down, they'll bolt down to any block. It doesn't matter. They will work. You just need some of that specialty stuff. You need the right valve covers, and you need the right intake. But besides that, it's all the same and it all works. So my winner is still the Vortec, but it does come at a cost. But like I said, when it comes to a head that you're going to find in a junkyard, this is going to be the head that you're going to find. That's why that is our winner. With that being said, I hope you guys did like this little 4-part series where we talked about all these heads, then did a final clash and comparison on them. I figured it was just something that would be useful for you guys, mostly because I know for me, I kind of wanted to know what heads were what and what was all the facts and information on them. So I figured if I could put that all together in videos for you guys, where if you only cared about the info for the the 426s, no, it's the 624s. I keep doing that. I'm thinking of a Hemi. Or the Swirl Port heads, or the Vortec head individually, you can go find that information. Or if you just wanted to see a head-to-head comparison and show them all off, we could do that as well. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you guys did enjoy this video and all the other videos from this series. If you did, remember to leave a like and subscribe, and we'll catch you next time here on Boneyard Revivals. Peace out.